Good morning students. I hope you all are fine and have gone through my previous video in which we discussed how does the nutrition takes place in amoeba. In animals, I told you earlier also that the process of nutrition gets completed in 5 steps, that are ingestion, digestion, absorption, assimilation and egestion. But the same 5 steps are followed in case of human beings. Nutrition in human beings. The entire human digestive system, it comprises of a alimentary canal. This alimentary canal is a long tube that consists of many organs starting from mouth, esophagus, stomach, small intestine and large intestine. But the process of digestion gets completed with the help of certain glands that are associated. These are mainly salivary glands, liver, pancreas, gastric glands, intestinal glands. All these glands play an equally important role than when the nutrition takes place in human beings. This is the diagram of the human digestive system. You see, this is the mouth. In the mouth, the cavity of the mouth is called as the buccal cavity. We find teeth, we find tongue, and there are certain salivary glands. Then there is a tube which is also known as esophagus or the food pipe. The food which we take in through the mouth passes through the esophagus, enters into the stomach. From the stomach, it goes into a long tube which is highly coiled. This long tube is called as small intestine. Although the small intestine is longer than large intestine, but since it is quite narrow, it is called as small intestine. And then you find this is large intestine, anus. There are certain glands. You could see this triangular shaped reddish colored gland called as liver. Inside the liver there is a gallbladder, and this is a leaf shaped gland called as the pancreas. Now I'll explain how the steps are being followed in case of human beings. First step in the mechanism of nutrition is the ingestion. Ingestion means taking in food. The food is taken in through the organ called as mouth. Food is put into the mouth with the help of hands. Then comes the second step, that is the digestion. Digestion in the human beings means the breakdown of complex food substance into the simpler substance. I told you earlier also, the food which we eat contains carbohydrates, contains proteins, contains fats. All these are complex substances which cannot be absorbed in the blood as such. So they are to be broken down into the simpler substances. The process of digestion begins in mouth, but since the food remains in the mouth for a very short period of time, it gets completed in the small intestine. The cavity of the mouth is also known as buccal cavity. In the buccal cavity we have teeth. Now what is the function of the teeth? Biting, chewing and grinding of food means large chunks of food which we eat are broken down into the smaller pieces. This is also called as physical digestion of the food. So teeth help in the physical digestion of the food. Then comes the tongue. Tongue helps in mixing the food with the saliva. Saliva is a liquid substance which is produced by salivary glands, and this contains the enzyme called as salivary amylase. Tongue helps in rolling the food with the saliva. It makes the food wet, and wetted food can easily be swallowed into the esophagus. Then comes the salivary glands. These salivary glands produce saliva. Saliva contains an enzyme called as salivary amylase. This is very important because it begins the digestion of carbohydrates or starch. It starts breaking down starch to give sugar. This is also known as chemical digestion of food. Food remains in the mouth for a very short time, and the partly digested food goes into the esophagus. This partly digested food is known as bolus here. Now, when the food moves into the esophagus, which is also known as food pipe, it has to go down into the stomach. The function of the esophagus is to carry the food into the stomach. How does this movement then takes place? How it carries? The walls of the esophagus contain certain muscles which can contract and expand rhythmically. This rhythmic contraction and expansion of the muscles of esophagus help in the movement of food down into the stomach. This type of movement is called peristaltic movement or peristalsis. Now from the esophagus, food has entered into the stomach. Now what happens to the food in the stomach? Stomach is a J-shaped organ which has three parts. One is cardiac, the upper part which is near to the esophagus. Another is the fundus. Third one is the pyloric part, which is near to the small intestine. The main body of the stomach is the longest part. Walls of the stomach contain gastric glands. These gastric glands secrete gastric juice, which plays the most important role in digestion inside the stomach. The digestion doesn't even get completed in the stomach. It gets completed in the small intestine. Now gastric juice in the stomach, it contains HCl, it contains the enzyme pepsin, and it contains the mucus. What is the function of these three? HCl. HCl performs two main functions. When HCl is secreted, it makes the medium of the stomach acidic, and in the acidic medium only enzyme pepsin gets activated, otherwise it does not function. Moreover, this acid, it kills the bacteria or the germs that may have entered along with the food in the stomach. The food which we eat may contain certain bacteria or germs. These are killed by HCl. Now, what is the function of pepsin? In the acidic medium, pepsin is active enough to begin the digestion of the proteins. Digestion of proteins begins in stomach only, and the proteins start breaking down into smaller molecules. Beta, again understand, these carbohydrates, these proteins, these fats are complex biomolecules. बहुत सारी simple units से मिलकर ये complex substances बनते हैं, and in the digestion step of nutrition they get broken down into the simpler substances. So in the presence of pepsin, which is working in the presence of HCl, these proteins get breakdown into the smaller molecules. Then comes the mucus. Mucus protects the inner lining of the stomach from the action of the acid. अगर mucus ना हो तो the acid will strike to the walls of the stomach and it may lead to the formation of ulcers in the stomach. So this is what happens inside the stomach. In the stomach, the digestion of protein has begun. Now the food enters into the small intestine. The entry of food from the stomach to the small intestine is controlled by the muscles. We call them as sphincter muscles. Stomach के cardiac part पे cardiac sphincter is present, and at the pyloric part pyloric sphincter is present. These sphincter muscles in every organ help in the further movement of the food. Now when the food enters into the small intestine, Small intestine is actually the longest part of alimentary canal. Entire alimentary canal is almost 9 meters long, but this small intestine is 6.5 meters. Though it is long, it is called small because it is very narrow. Remember that herbivores have longer intestines as compared to carnivores because these herbivores eat grass, and grass contains the complex substance called as cellulose, and cellulose is not easily digested. It takes a longer time to be digested. The question was asked in the previous year exam also, why herbivores have longer intestines. Small intestine is the site of complete digestion. जितना भी starch है, the amount of protein, the amount of fat, whichever is in the food, gets completely digested, completely broken down into simple substances in small intestine only. But how? This small intestine, it receives three major secretions. One is bile juice from the liver, another is pancreatic juice from the pancreas, and the third is intestinal juice from the intestinal glands which are present in the walls of small intestine. Now in our next video I'll tell you what are the functions of bile juice, pancreatic juice and intestinal juice.